Hello everyone, this is Mukundan Raghavan, and this video we are going to see Java consumer function, and we are also going to see what are the possible Selenium use cases for the Java consumer function. If you are totally new to the Java consumer function and functional interface, let's start from the basics. Let's start with what is consumer function. A consumer function is a functional interface from the Java package. Then the next question would be functional interface. A functional interface can be considered as an interface that contains only one abstract method. However, we are not going to create a functional interface for ourselves. There are a couple of functional interfaces available from the Java latest version. We are going to use one of the consumer function. Before proceeding, we will try to understand what is the need of consumer function. Before understanding this, we will understand the functional programming. As we know, Java is object-oriented programming. Still, latest versions of Java supports functional programming by using the functional interface. And generally, in functional programming, we will be passing the data or object to the method, as well as we will be sending the function itself, which means we are not only sending the data but also the behavior to be done in the future. So I am passing the function as one of the arguments. So that's the main part of the functional interface or functional programming. Now here we are creating one function which can be considered as a consumer function. The nature of consumer function is getting one parameter and doing some action over that and does not return any value. These are the simple three activities can be done by the functional interface or functional consumer. So here you can see I am creating the consumer function, consumer, and in angle brackets we mention the type. That means that which kind of input will be given to that function. And I am totally giving this function name as a message consumer so that I can use it in the future. Now once you get into the definition, the only input which is message, and this message would be the type of string, because we already mentioned this consumer function will be having the input as a string type. Then using that message, I'm going to just display the message inside the console. And here I am not writing the function in a very traditional way. I am writing in the lambda expression. Then message consumer is the reference for us. Either we can send it to anyone or we can keep it ourselves. Whenever some condition satisfies, we can execute. But here we are not executing directly. We will be executing with the another method called accept, and this method will accept whichever the input you are actually passing to the message consumer. And for example, here we are passing the hello world, which will be internally taken as a message, and this message will be displayed inside our console. In this here you can see whichever the method or whichever the implementation we do inside the consumer function will do certain action, but it will not return any value. Either you can write your own function which is return type void, or you can use any function based on your input type, for example string, and any string method can be used. However, the return type should be void because consumer function will not return any result. Now we have clearly understood what is consumer function. Then the next question would be, when do we use the consumer function? Whenever we want to perform an action on an object without returning any result, as we are clearly understood in the previous explanation. And the main point here, to pass a behavior around as data. We were sending the data, now we are sending the behavior by passing the function, and it is one of the main objective of the functional programming paradigms. And even we have other type of functional interfaces such as predicate and function itself, which has its own purpose and own way of working. But this video we will try to cover the consumer function. Why do we need that? In order to make the code very clear, modular, readable, and maintainable, we are totally segregating or isolating the behavior itself from the actual code so that user is free to give their own behavior to make the action over the element or to the input. So that's the main reason we will use the consumer function. Moreover, when we try to see the code, we can clearly understand how it actually works. How do we implement the consumer function? Rather than reading all this content, let's go to the code and try to understand more. In the same example, here we have the consumer functional interface. The input type would be string and the name is message consumer, and message will be passed, and using the message I am calling the method system.out.println, and we mentioned we can do some certain action. However, it will not return any value. If you just mouse over and see the println method, here you can see the println method return type would be void. So that's the reason we are totally fine to use the println method. We can use any method which returns nothing, which should be return type of void. And later point, we are using the accept method, which is from the functional interface consumer. And whichever the value we are just passing, that will be sent to the message. And even if you mouse over and see the consumer interface, you can clearly understand. Here you can see the functional interface, and this is the type. This type can be any type, valid Java type, and the same type will be taken inside your accept method, and whatever you explained previously, that will be executed. For example, the same implementation will be executed with the same type of method. Now we have understood very basics about the consumer function. Let's go into the Selenium use cases. So let's go to the main function, and here you can see these are the very static or boilerplate code where you can create driver and set up the driver and open the sosdemo.com, and you have set of XPath in the multi-text block so that you can use the multiple XPath in the same variable. Now imagine I have created the new framework called Selenist, and I want to have a method perform action on element. But in this case, the action could be anything. It could be click, it could be send keys, it could be clear, it could be checkbox, it could be anything. I don't want to create multiple methods. I want to give the freedom to the user decide which action has to be done on that element. And obviously, when you do some actions over the element inside the web testing, you need the driver and you need to have the XPath to find the element, and you need to the exact action or behavior what has to be done on the web element. Now here you can see I am passing my behavior as a function. Web element click. So web element will be your interface or class, and click will be your method. The same way even I can implement my own way, same like our consumer function. My input will be web element and web element send keys, or the same way we can mention the clear. Now the question arises, why should I send the function as an input? Because I created this method in such a way, it will expect the consumer function. Here you can see the consumer function will be accepted. However, the function should have the input type of web element. If I go to the previous one, here you can see all the input will be the web element. Now if you come here again, so what is the actual implementation? Here I am creating the WebDriver wait object so that it will wait for some time, and XPath expressions, whichever the XPath I am sending, I am just splitting into the new line character, and I will be having multiple XPath. And here I am going through each and every XPath, waiting for that element to be visible and available. Then if it is not null, if it is displayed, if it is enabled, then I am executing the method. Which method? Whichever the method I am sending as part of consumer function, that will be executed. Basically, if I would have sent click method, then element will be clicked. If I would have sent, let's say, send keys, I would have just do the send action. The same way here the consumer function can be anything, but it will be executed only after having some certain conditions satisfied. For example, it has to wait until the presence of the element is available. It should be displayed, it should be enabled. Then I can do the real action. Now again, going back to the previous code, here you can see I can just use any method. The input should be the web element. So what I mean is, like, see, send keys is the method, whereas it is from the interface web element. So if I want to refer this function, I need to mention web element colon, which is the reference operator for the method, and send keys. So that's what actually it is happening here. Or even you can write your own Lambda expression. Even sometime you can write your own implemented function and you can pass it. Or even you can write the consumer function separately and send it. It's up to the individual user which way we prefer to use it. But at the end, we need to send one consumer function. And when you send the consumer function, you are not executing the method here. You are just giving the method reference so that whenever the condition satisfies, whenever I execute the accept method, then only this method will be executed. Now the second question arises, so every time it will be very easy for me to mention something directly driver dot find element dot click element. Why should I make so complicated? This is where the modularity comes into picture. Now I can totally change this and make the user life easy by creating the Selenium consumers. Now what is Selenium consumers? Just go to the Selenium consumers. Whichever the functional or consumer functions I could create out of the web element, I created everything here. For example, I created for click, send keys, and get text. For simplicity, we have created only 3 methods, and it is coming under the Selenium consumers. Now what happens is, rather than writing every time your own method, you can use our existing interface or existing maybe reusable utility, Selenium consumers dot send keys or click, so that we will just mention the driver, XPath, and which action you want to do, you can mention that. If it is only the UI action, click, or let's say send keys, you will be mentioning as per the requirement. In case of click, you don't need to give any input, but in case of send keys, you need to give some input which has to be sent inside our web element. So this code will get more improved, and hereafter I don't need to write multiple method on the perform action on an element. At the same time, tomorrow if there is a new action, for example, I want to add the drag and drop, and drag and drop will not give any return value, because in any function, if it is something like a consumer function, then it has to satisfy, it does some action, but it does not return any value. To confirm that, here you can see get text method and it returns the string type. However, I am not returning anything. Again, if you go to the send keys, if you go to the send keys, it return type is void. Here if you go to the click, return type is void. In get text also, even though I return the string type, but you cannot capture that because consumer function returned nothing. It will be void. So that's the reason even though you use the method of return type of string, it will not be taken into your calling function. Basically, you cannot get this value out, get text. Now we have written this. If you go to this method again, see here you can see all the functional things we have implemented by using the logics like displayed, enabled, waiting for the time, everything. But the behavior of the web element or the action to be done on the web element will be totally given to the user. And tomorrow I can add any kind of consumer function. Either I can use my own Selenium consumer functions to be added, or I can read directly the web element and I can create any method. So that it will be having more modularity and more control over to the user rather to the actual author of the framework. To summarize everything, consumer function is a simple function which will be sent to the other method, and this consumer function will do certain action and will not return anything. That means that your implementation should have the methods which returns nothing. Even if you have some return value, it will not be returned because consumer function will consume something and does some actions. That's all. And it will not execute directly whenever you call the accept method with the input, it will be doing that one. Then we have seen the Selenium use cases by using the main Java, and we have seen perform an action on the element, and I am giving the action as a consumer function so that this consumer function will be executed only after certain conditions are met. And even I can simplify the code rather than I every time write the consumer function. I can create the utility function for Selenium consumers. I can mention all the consumer functions so that you can directly use the Selenium consumer start whichever the consumer function you want. So this is all about the consumer function, and thanks for watching and have a great day.